that scene. What are you looking so sad about, Gans?
I'm surprised. I mean, I'm really insulted. That's not right, what you just said.
What do you mean, what I just said?
I mean, I'm getting a drink of water. I'm late getting home, but you talk. I said something about the greatest heavyweight champ, man. I'm a hometown man, and you talk about Joe Louis, man. Joe Louis wouldn't be nothing for me. Joe, I tell you, Joe, do you think you would have stood a chance with me?
Well, Clay, one time during my career, I was on a Bomber One tour.
I would have been a bum compared to you.
What's happening, my people? It's Cash Sports again, back for another afternoon with the family. That's right. You know what time it is. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Boxtorian, bringing you all that boxing history. Boxing is the greatest sport of them all. That's why we love it. Can't get enough of it. Salute to everyone and welcome to another episode of Cash Sports, the Boxtorian. Today, boxing pioneers, Dixon, Gans, Richmond, and Wills. Dixon, Gans, Richmond, and Wills, boxing pioneers, has the family today. This is the Hump Day edition of Cash Sports, the Boxtorian. We're going to talk about some of the boxing pioneers today. We're going to highlight the careers of George Dixon, the first black athlete to win any kind of a title in any sport. The old master, Joe Gans, the first black American to win a boxing world title. Bill Richmond, who came before all of them, way back in the middle 1800s. And Harry Wills, the Black Panther, who was the number one contender from 1900 to 1930. But we're going to cover all of these pioneers today on Cash Sports, the Boxtorian. I would in the week. We're going to cover our country tomorrow, which I think is going to be a history of boxing in Cuba. Friday, the life and career of John Pascal. Okay. Getting close to Bud and Canelo. I don't think we have any big names in there this weekend, but we got boxing. So, but yeah, let's get into our fight of the day. We always got to start the show with our fight of the day. So let's start with that. With further ado, the fight of the day. Excuse me. Okay, today's fight of the day is Thomas the Hitman Hearns versus Jose Pepino Cuevas, August 2nd, 1980. Hearns versus Cuevas. Okay, August 2nd, 1980. 45 years ago. Okay, this very month. Let's get into this. Let's talk about that. Hearns and Cuevas. Now, they called it World War II, an odd, if not slightly offensive billing, but the logic was undeniable. In 1980, no division in boxing mattered more or inspired greater excitement than the welterweights, 147. It was as if so much talent had assembled itself in the 147-pound weight class that it reached critical mass and exploded in a series of terrific matchups. You know, you think about like 154 today, how that's loaded. That's how 147 was in 1980. Listen to the names, okay? This is 147, 1980, some of the names. Carlos Palomino, Wilfred Benitez, Roberto Duran, Pepino Cuevas, Sugar Ray Leonard, Randy Shields, Thomas Hearns. Okay? The death of the division embarrassed most other divisions. Less than 2 months before this fight, Leonard and Duran had fought in Montreal, galvanizing the attention of the sports world like no fight had in years. That was World War I. And the promoters were hoping that Hearns and Cuevas would be a similar box office bonanza as Leonard and Duran had been. What's up, Mike? Rem, salute. Mike, Thomas Hearns versus Pepino Cuevas today. And that 147-pound division was loaded in 1980. Okay? Everybody harping about 154 today. That was nothing compared to the talent of 147 in 1980. Roberto Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard had just fought a couple of months before this fight. And they were hoping that the winner of this would get the winner. They were hoping it would be Hearns, right? So that would be a fight everybody was waiting for, Hearns and Leonard. But Hearns had to get past Cuevas first. Okay? That's what this fight was all about. And Hearns versus Cuevas was a big fight, no question, shown on closed-circuit telecasts throughout North America. Even though the combatants were not as well known to mainstream sports fans as Duran and Leonard was, but within boxing circles, the reputations of these two power punchers boomed just as large. For true fans of the fight game, this matchup was hotly anticipated, as the fight fans knew it was a tilt destined to not go the distance. Okay, this one wasn't going the distance. with these two heavy hitters in there, Hearns and Cuevas. Hearns, young, undefeated, a hero to the people of Detroit, Michigan, had been a highly successful amateur boxer, but unlike Leonard, had failed to make the Olympic team. But many in boxing now viewed him as an even more impressive talent than Sugar Ray. Hearn had chewed up the division, knocking out one contender after another, surprising anyone who had seen him compete as an amateur. Because as an amateur, he was mainly a light-hitting boxer, if you can believe that about Thomas Hearns, but Emmanuel Stewart brought that power out of it. So no one that saw him as an amateur could believe the way he was running through people at the pro level, taking them out of there. Okay? In the past, Hearns had been a careful boxer, using his long arms and nimble feet to stick and move. It was trainer Emmanuel Stewart of the Kronk Gym who changed Hearns' style, showing him how to use his freakish 6'1" height and 78-inch reach, comparable to that of a heavyweight, to generate incredible power, especially with his right hand. Stewart taught Hearns about a little thing called leverage, and once the hitman got the hang of it, his opponents ran for cover, and the fans in Detroit started calling him the Hitman. They started calling him the Hitman, Thomas Hearns. And Cuevas, he had pop himself, okay? Now, Mexico's Pepino Cuevas had been WBA welterweight champion for 4 years, and the mere mention of his name inspired a furrowing of brows. He was not just respected, but legitimately feared. Fighting professionally since he was only 14, he had never been knocked down and had defended his title 11 times, 10 by knockout, okay? His punching power was legendary. His left hook didn't just hurt his opponents or knock them out. It sent them to the hospital. Angel Espada, broken jaw. Billy Backus, fractured orbital bone. Harold Weston, broken jaw and broken ribs. Simply put, Cuevas was one of the most dangerous welterweights who had ever lived, okay? Sonny Boy Boxing. What's up, Sonny Boy? How are you today? Working through our fight of the day today, Thomas the Hitman Hearns versus Jose Pepino Cuevas, two killers. You know, and like I was saying, if you think 154 is loaded today, that's like child's play compared to 147 in 1980. Now, Leonard had lost to Duran, and fans were wondering if another young American talent was about to lose to another fearsome, hard-punching Latino champion, right? The fight was held in Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan, in front of a fervent crowd. Everyone there to see one of their own make it. No one left disappointed. No one left Joe Louis Arena in Detroit disappointed. They came to see the Hitman. At the opening bell, two gunslingers, men accustomed to dominating opponents with sheer firepower, faced off. They sized each other up for some seconds, Hearns snapping out his sharp left jab before losing a distance and before closing the distance and simultaneously exchanging left hands. Both landed, but it was the Hitman's hook which sent Cuevas tumbling across the ring. Hearns didn't need an invitation. The Motor City Cobra immediately moved in and struck with its awesome right hand, and then struck again and again. Before the first round was over, the previously still chin Cuevas had been staggered 4 more times by Hearns' thundering right hand. Okay. In the second round, the hitman picked up where he had left off in the first round. His 6 and 8-inch advantages in height and reach, plus his obvious edge in hand speed, made it impossible for Cuevas to get in range and bring his left hook into play. Hearns punched freely, in total command. Finally, a devastating right hand perfectly on Pepino's jaw, landed perfectly on Pepino's jaw and turned his legs to spaghetti. The Mexican's whole body weaved and buckled like a palm tree in a hurricane as he struggled to stay erect. Hearns watched for a moment and then struck home another right, and Pepino hit the canvas face first. Amazingly, Cuevas beat the count, but his manager had seen enough and stepped through the ropes. Thomas Hearns was the new WBA champion, and the countdown to the inevitable showdown with Sugar Ray Leonard had begun. There you have it, the fight of the day. Hearns passed the test. The next thing was Sugar Ray Leonard. Oh, you remember that one, Sonny Boy? Yeah. That was the setup to Hearns Leonard super fight. Yeah, 147 was just loaded back then. Wow. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about some pioneers of the sport. Okay. We're going to talk about George Dixon, Joe Gans, Bill Richmond, and Harry Wills. Okay. So let's get into that now. Okay. Okay, come on, man. Bear with me for one moment, please. All right. Pioneers, boxing pioneers. That's what we're talking about today. Salute to Sonny Boy Boxing, Mike Rem, and Miss Cass in the building so far. On this Hump Day Wednesday afternoon edition of Cass Sports the Box Story. Okay, first we're going to cover George Dixon. He was the first black world champion in any sport, not just boxing, any sport. Mike Mazik, what's up, Mike? Mike is in the building. Yeah, pioneers, boxing pioneers today. George Dixon first, Canadian fighter. Okay, let's talk about George. There's George, sitting there chilling with his arms folded. Now, who was the first black boxer to become a world boxing champion? And when did this occur? Now, though he did not have a title from a sanctioning body, Canadian, George Dixon was recognized as world champion, the first black boxing champion. In the modern sanctioning era, battling Siki was the first black undisputed world boxing champion. The boxing was integrated long before baseball, basketball, hockey, or football. And George Dixon of Canada was the first black fighter to capture a world title, defeating Nuke Wallace for the vacant bantamweight title on June 27, 1890 in London, England. So who was George Dixon? Okay. Who was George Dixon? Dixon was born in Africville, the black community in Halifax, Nova Scotia, in Canada, on June 29, 1870. Now, he moved as a child to Boston, Massachusetts with his family and began boxing there at about 14 years old. Dixon became the first black man to be proclaimed a world boxing champion when he won the world bantamweight title on May 10, 1888, after a fight with Tommy Spider Kelly, and was universally considered the champion after knocking out Nuke Wallace of England in 18 rounds 2 years later on June 27, 1890. On May 31st, 1891, Dixon defended his title on retaining his bantamweight crown by beating Cal McCarthy in 22 rounds, and then moved up to featherweight, where he won the world title by beating England's Fred Johnson on June 27, 1892. Dixon was known as Little Chocolate. At 5 feet 3.5 inches tall, and he weighed only 87 pounds when he began his pro boxing career. Just 87 pounds. Okay, that's Mike Mazzik's birthday, June 29th. Wow. All right. Okay. June 29th. Yeah, that was when Dixon was born. Right, yeah. So George Dixon and Mike Mazzik was born on the same day, June 29th. Dixon like over 100 years before Mike. Yeah. Okay, well, let's continue. Now, Dixon was known as Little Chocolate, right? Like I said, 5 feet 3.5 inches tall, and he only weighed 87 pounds when he began his career, began his pro career, 87 pounds. Wow. Now, Dixon is considered one of the first modern technical boxers and is widely credited for developing shadow boxing and being the first fighter to make the extensive use of the heavy bag. Yeah, that was George Dixon. At featherweight, Dixon was the first 2-time and then the first 3-time world champion. He may have fought as many as 800 fights, with literally hundreds of unrecorded exhibitions in vaudeville halls. Unofficially as many as 800 fights. Dixon retired from boxing at age 34, but he only lived 3 more years after retiring. Okay, died at 37. Wow. Dixon was a victim of the virulent racism in the post-Civil War United States and had a sad life after boxing. He died in New York City in abject poverty, a hopeless alcoholic at only age 37. He was an inaugural inductee in the Canada Sports Hall of Fame and was also named to the Ring Magazine Hall of Fame, the World Boxing Hall of Fame, and the big one, the International Boxing Hall of Fame. So he's in all of them. Now, battling Sicky, he was the first black undisputed world champion in the modern sanctioning era. Yeah, first black undisputed. Now, battling Sicky was born Louis Mubarak Fall on September 16, 1897, in the port city of St. Louis, French Senegal. Another child born into hopeless poverty. It is recorded that as a teenager, he died from the top of his cliff to fetch coins thrown by French tourists into the sea. A female Dutch dancer noticed the handsome teen and offered to take him to Europe. Now, at first, Louis Fall worked washing dishes. Then at 14 years old, he began his career in boxing, same age as George Dixon, 14. His early career was nothing special, and there was no indication he would one day dethrone the great George S. Carpenter and become the second undisputed light heavyweight world champion. and the first black undisputed champion in the 105 years of the modern sanctioning era. Lewis's boxing career was interrupted by World War I, and he enlisted in the French army, joining the 8th Colonials. He fought at Gallipoli and was injured at the Somme, earning the same medals as Carpenter, right? After displaying incredible bravery in battle. After his honorable discharge, Sicky resumed his boxing career, fighting in France and in Holland, where he met his first wife, Lynn, with whom he had a son, Louis. An impressive run of victories led to his tilt at the world title. On September 24th, 1922, Louis Fall, by then known as Battling Sicky, knocked out the woefully unprepared Carpenter for the world light heavyweight title. Carpenter took it lightly. Okay. Considering Sicky nothing more than a glorified punching bag, Carpenter had not trained, and he paid the price for it. Jarrell Hattie is in the building. Salute, Jarrell. And Kensaw Love 1. Okay, salute. Jarrell Hattie, Kensaw Love 1. Yeah, we're just looking at some pioneers from way back when. George Dixon, Joe Gans, Bill Richmond, Harry Wills, and also Battling Sicky. Real name was Louis Fall. He was a French fighter. We're talking about him now. Okay, but salute Jarrell and Kensaw Love 1. Okay, let's continue. That's George Dixon up there. He was the first black athlete to win a title in any sport. And boxing was the first sport integrated, before football, basketball, baseball, all of them. Boxing was the first sport to be integrated. But yeah, George S. Carpenter took him lightly. And the Battling Sicky took his title. And the story goes that Sicky was brought in to make Carpenter look good, right? And only began to fight back when Carpenter began viciously beating him. Down twice in the third round, Sicky rose genuinely angry, and that's when the fight started. Sicky came back scoring a 4-punch combination to the body and head for a knockdown late in the third round. In between the third and fourth rounds, Carpenter told his corner he had broken his right knuckles. In the fourth round, Sicky took completely over the fight, battering Carpenter with body shots, while Carpenter was reduced to headbutting and fouling. The fouling was so blatant, the French crowd began angrily booing Carpenter, who was a national hero in France. So that had to be bad. They were in France. He was a national hero, a war hero, one of the greatest boxers to ever come out of France. He was fouling this black fighter so bad, the French fans started booing him, okay? In the sixth round, a body shot from Sicky put Carpenter down for the count. What happened became even more incredible when in front of 55,000 people, the referee disqualified Sicky for supposedly tripping Carpenter and declared Carpenter lying flat on his back to be the winner. That was bad, right? The crowd was outraged and began to swarm the field. The president of the French Boxing Federation, sensing a riot, sent the fight to the judges, who then overruled the referee and declared Sicky the new world champion. Yeah, that was bad. He knocked the man out. The referee disqualified and said he tripped the man. And Carpenter laying flat on his back, unconscious. The referee declared him the winner. But then the president of the French Boxing Federation was in attendance, and he saw a riot getting ready to start, so he hurriedly overruled the referee and sent it to the judges, and they declared Sicky the winner. Why would it have to go to the judges? The man was knocked out. He should have just overruled him and said he won, right? And Sicky was the toast of Paris after his incredible upset victory. He hosted a champagne banquet to celebrate and bought 2 lion cubs that he literally paraded down the street, throwing money to strangers. Although Sicky lost the title in his very next fight to Mike Mateague, his win over Carpenter assured him a place in boxing history. Yep. But he had not long to enjoy it. Sicky, who was living in the United States by then with his second wife, had trouble with the rampant racism of the times and was in and out of trouble constantly. He was discovered in the early morning hours of December 15, 1925, in Hell's Kitchen near New York City at West 41st Street. He died from 2 gunshot wounds in the back, 1 bullet in the lung and another in the kidney. New York City police theorized Sicky had gotten into a brawl in one of the numerous illegal nightclubs in the neighborhood and was followed into the street and shot from behind. He was literally shot to death in the same spot where the summer before he had been attacked and almost killed with a knife. He lived close by, and his wife identified his body at the local police station. Sicky left an estate of less than $600 to his wife. Now, although he was born a Muslim in Senegal, his wife gave him a Christian burial in Harlem on Friday, December 19th, 1925, telling the press he had lived as a Christian and would be buried as one. However, he was not allowed to rest in peace. His body was exhumed from the grave his wife had buried him in Flushing, Queens, thanks to the WBC, the African Boxing Union, and James Mercante, and returned to Senegal for a hero's burial. A celebration was held at the UN to acknowledge this. The WBC has also lobbied for years to get Battling Sicky into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, but so far have failed. Wow, yeah, he should be in there. What we call boxing today began in 17th century Britain, and black fighters were there. Boxing really sprang into its own during the Regency age in Great Britain, where a subset of the nobility known as Corinthians took up the sweet science as part of their fixation of sport. Okay. Be with me for a moment, please. There we go. Okay. I was just checking the chat, see if anybody else had come in. Now, they're the first 2 great black prize fighters emerged, Tom Molyneux and Bill Richmond, both born slaves in America, who both spent a large part of their lives in Britain, where they both lived as free men and where both died. And we're going to cover Molyneux later. In 1867, the Marquis of Queensberry published his famous rules, and the modern era of boxing began. Now, boxing integrated decades earlier than any other sport. Decades earlier than any other sport, boxing did. And back then, boxing was the only sport that the best black athletes had to compete in. The only major sport. None of the other ones were integrated. Except for boxing, black men in the United States were barred from every other major sport until relatively recent. 40s, something like that. Mm-hmm. For fanboys who bray that poor folks had other ways to make a good living, Perry Armstrong answered that best when asked why he boxed. Because a poor black kid with no education has no way to even make a living. Instead of working for scraps, I box and eat the finest steak. Boxing allowed black men to fight for titles at least 53 years before every other major sport allowed blacks to even play on major league teams. Again, Canadian George Dixon won the bantamweight title in 1892 and became the first black athlete to win a world championship in any sport. And Joe Gans became the first black American boxing champion in 1902. Jack Johnson was the heavyweight title in 1908. Now, even though public rage at Johnson kept another black heavyweight from fighting for the title until Joe Louis in 1937, black fighters continued to fight for the title in the lighter weight classes. Okay, that was just heavyweight where they were barred out. Battling Sickey became the first sanctioning era undisputed champion at light heavyweight in 1922. And baseball did not integrate until 1945, 53 years after the first black boxing champion. 53 years. Define Arnie One in the building. Salute. Define Arnie One. How are you today? Just looking at some pioneers today in boxing. Let's salute to Define Arnie One. Okay, good to see you today. Football didn't integrate until 1946. Basketball 1950. Hockey 1958. From then, there were unofficial roster limits. But even then, there were unofficial roster limits for black players. The best black athletes were not fully welcome in other sports until relatively recently. So they boxed, but no longer. Why were blacks allowed to fight for the title and not play Major League Baseball or other sports? Jack Blackburn probably nailed it when he said, okay, let's move on to the next person. That wasn't important what he said. Okay, let's go to the old master, Joe Gans. Yeah, the old master is next. Joe Gans. Just talking about some pioneers today. That was George Dixon and the battling Sickey. Okay. Now we go to the old master, Joe Gans. Bear with me for one moment, please. Okay, let's go. I'm not fully prepared. I got home like 20 minutes to 2 or something. Yeah. But how's everybody today? This is the Wednesday afternoon edition of Cast Sports. The old master's from Baltimore, too. My homeboy. It's our homeboy, Jarrell. Joe Gans. The old master. Mm-hmm. He was the first black American champion. But George Dixon, the Canadian, had already won a title in 1880 something. And yeah, George Dixon and Mike Mazzick was born on the same day. Yeah, June 29th. All right. I think the old master was, George Dixon was June 29th, 1870. I think he got Mike by, safe to say he got Mike by over 100 years. I don't think we got no big names in boxing this weekend. But man, we are closing in on that Bud Canelo fast now. It's September 13th, right? And this is like 2 or 3 weeks. First is this weekend. Oh yeah, we're closing it fast. Let's talk about Joe Gans now. That's still George Dixon. There's the old master. Right there. Joe Gans, the old master. Okay. Born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1874, the great Joe Gans got his start in boxing the way many black fighters of his time did, in observed exploitative spectacles called battle royals. Okay? Now, what battle royals were? For these brutal winner-take-all brawls, several young black men would be blindfolded and pushed into the boxing ring at the same time. There were no rules. It was just sheer mayhem as the desperate combatants flared away at each other until finally one man was left standing, and that was the winner. And more often than not, that man was Joe Gans, who went on to have his first legitimate fight in 1893. And it didn't take long for him to establish a reputation as a fighter to be feared. But that's how he got his start in those battle royals. Battle royales. He's had it in the WWF, remember? Hulk Hogan used to always win them. Okay. It is another shot of the old master. Now, intelligence and the sophistication of his ring technique, right? While many, from the beginning, what set Gans apart was his intelligence and the sophistication of his ring technique. Now, while many, if not most, pugilists of the time looked to swarm or brawl, Gans developed a style which capitalized on his exceptional athleticism and quickness. Yeah, because most fighters would just come out there to the middle, toe that mark, because you had to come toe the mark to start the round, and that's where they would be for the rest of the round, right there in the middle, just slugging it out. Gans brought the sweet science into it, right? He uses his exceptional athleticism and quickness, right? He delivered blows in a precise and studied manner with grace and economy of movement. Historians credit him with building upon the shrewd ringcraft of his predecessor, all-time great bantamweight champion George Dixon, aka Little Chocolate, had popularized the basic technique in terms of stance, footwork, blocking, and counterpunching, as well as the central importance of the jab. Yeah, George Dixon was really started scientific boxing, got away from that just standing there slugging it out, and Joe Gans just built upon that, okay? After Gans, all boxers learned these techniques. While he also possessed terrific punching power, Joe's ring smarts and general canniness were so much a part of his success that he earned the moniker, the Old Master, long before he could ever be considered old. In fact, he would not live long enough to ever fulfill his famous nickname. He didn't get old, right? He was in his 30s when he died. But they still called him the Old Master. Okay. And newspaper stories from the time attest to Gans' masterful technique and high reputation. In 1906, the Boston Globe described him as one of the most wonderful fighters from a scientific view that the world has ever known. There is not a trick or point that he does not know. The San Francisco Chronicle stated that there never was a fighter who could block with such skill and precision as the Old Master. His contemporaries also recognized his brilliance. Pound for pound great Sam Langford, who defeated Gans under rather exceptional circumstances, declared him the finest boxer who had ever lived. And man, I've been trying for that fight for years and never can get it up. Sam Langford and Joe Gans. That was like in the early, like between 1901 and 1910, somewhere around there. I would love to see that, Sam Langford and Joe Gans, but never seen it. They say Sam Langford won it though, right? But he declared Joe Gans the best boxer who ever lived. Three-time champion Bob Fitzsimmons regarded Joe Gans as the cleverest fighter, big or little, that ever put on boxing gloves. The great Benny Leonard, who learned to box while Gans was still champion, idolized the old master. His own highly cerebral ringcraft strongly influenced by Joe Gans, Benny Leonard. One of the, if Roberto Duran isn't the greatest lightweight ever, then it's Benny Leonard. Okay, one of those two. And I always tell y'all how incredible that is. Benny Leonard fought in the 20s, Roberto Duran in the 70s and 80s, and they were trained by the same man. Ain't that crazy? Wow. There's Joe Gans and Abe Attell. Abe Attell called Gans the best lightweight of all time. They were friends. See them there working out together. Yeah, they fought too. Friends fought back then, right? You my friend, let's make some money together. Now, but despite being highly regarded, Gans did not receive a title shot until 1900, when he fought Frank Ern for the championship and abruptly quit in the 12th round due to an eye injury. Now, the circumstances of the loss were exploited by some to bolster the reputation. Repugnant belief of the time that black men lacked the same grit and courage as whites. But in fact, Joe asked for the fight to be halted only after his eye had actually been dislodged from its socket. Wow. As reported by several newspapers, a clash of heads caused a severe injury, which made continuing impossible. I guess so. The eye was dislodged from the socket. Wow. Who would continue after that? Later that same year, Gans met brawler Terry McGovern in Chicago and was knocked down 8 times in less than 2 rounds before the match was stopped. The result was greeted with widespread disgust. No one believed it legitimate. Yeah, they say he threw that one. The resulting uproar prompted the city of Chicago to ban boxing, a ban that held for over 2 decades. And Gans later admitted to taking a dive on orders from his manager. Yeah, everybody knew that one was thrown. And in Chicago, it was in Chicago, they banned boxing for like 20 years, over 20 years, because of that fight. Yeah. Clearly a thrown fight. That's the one where it happened at. Went down, what was it, like 7 times in less than 2 rounds? Yeah, him against Terry McGovern. Yeah, McGovern was a brawler. Yeah. And Gans later admitted that he threw that fight. Mm-hmm. Yep. He later admitted that he threw it on orders from his manager. Didn't even get paid for throwing it. His manager just ordered him to throw it. But I bet the manager got paid. Now, while this constituted one of 2 certified instances where Gans participated in a fix, few doubt that there were numerous occasions on which Joe had no choice but to box to orders. Right? The ugly truth was that the great champion often entered the ring handcuffed, mandated by gamblers or his manager to carry an opponent a certain number of rounds, or even to lose. Lightweight champion Willie Ritchie, who knew Joe, states in an interview that Gans had to do as he was told by the white managers. They were crooks. They framed fights. And being a Negro, the poor guy had to follow orders. Otherwise, he had starved to death. Yeah, this is what one of his friends said about it. You know, this guy was a white guy, but him and Joe were friends. That's what he said about it. If he didn't follow orders, Joe wouldn't get fights. Meanwhile, in fights that were on the level, Gans had to endure all kinds of unfair treatment, such as making weight just minutes before the fight or while wearing his boxing gear, not to mention being flagrantly fouled. And when the fighting was done, even when he was the victor, he often watched his white opponents walk away with the lion's share of the cash. Okay. There we go. That's he just posing with Peter Jackson there. Gans on the right, Peter Jackson on the left. Okay? So, a year after the defeat to Earn, Gans secured a rematch, and this time flattened the champion in a single round to finally win the title. The victory made Gans the first American-born black to hold a world title belt in any sport, right? American-born. George Dixon was Canadian, remember? This did not sit well with the many and racism would in fact define both the rest of Gans' career and his life. He defended his championship on a regular basis, and in 1904 defeated James Edward Britt by disqualification after being punched while he was down. Britt, a white man, then claimed to be the rightful champion, despite the disqualification. They had the backing of many for no reason other than bigotry. When Britt then lost to Battling Nelson, it set up a showdown that the sporting public clamored for. Nelson versus Gans for the undisputed championship, undisputed lightweight championship. The resulting duel, held in Nevada in September of 1906, proved historic for boxing, while tragic for Gans. Yeah, that was thought of as one of the first, Battling Nelson and Joe Gans, one of the first super fights in boxing history. That one was, yep. The terms of the fight were horribly unfair to Gans, especially when one considers that he, not Nelson, was the rightful title holder. Not only did he have to cede most of the purse money to Nelson, but Nelson insisted Gans make weight 3 separate times prior to the fight, each time while wearing his boxing gear. The last time just hours before the fight. This was to be one of the last fight to the finish fights in boxing history, and it was a grueling war, though largely one-sided. Nelson was outclassed for the most part, and Gans scored several knockdowns. Finally, in round 42, Nelson reached his limit and intentionally struck Gans below the belt to foul out, get disqualified. 42 rounds. And that was a fight where Joe Gans broke his arm in the 34th round and fought the last 8 rounds with a broken arm. Yep. Yeah, there they are. Battling it out. Joe Gans and Battling Nelson. 42 rounds. One of the last fights to the finish. Yep. Las Vegas, Nevada. Ooh. Following this victory, Gans was never the same. The strain of the constant dehydration to make weight, plus the epic battle in the Nevada heat, took their toll, and soon after, he contracted tuberculosis. Amazingly, he would continue boxing for another 2 years, even meeting Battling Nelson twice more, however, losing both times. But it was obvious to all this was not the same Gans, with reporters remarking on his dull eyes and gray skin. The San Francisco Chronicle even noted him shivering from fever in the third fight with Nelson. By the summer of 1910, more than a year after his last fight, it was obvious he was dying, and he embarked in the long train ride back east to see his mother before it was too late. Word spread, and soon hundreds of people were gathering at the train stops along the way to pay their respects. He died in his mother's arms at the age of only 35 in his home city of Baltimore, Maryland, where thousands attended the funeral of the old master, Joe Gans. Here he is, the old master. Joe Gans' final record including newspaper decisions, stands at an astonishing 159 wins, 12 losses, 20 draws, right? That's 191 fights. With many, if not most of the draws and losses being fights he actually won or intentionally forfeited, right? He deserves to be remembered as one of the finest boxers of all time, regardless of weight, and arguably the best lightweight ever. More than one boxing reporter from Gans' era pegged him as the greatest fighter who had ever lived. At any rate, Ned Fleischer, founder of Ring Magazine, rated Gans the all-time best lightweight, while historian Charlie Rose ranked him second only to Benny Leonard. Eminent boxing historian Monty D. Cox regards Gans as the greatest lightweight ever, and in terms of the best boxers of all time, pound for pound, second only to the great Sugar Ray Robinson, the old master Joe Gans. Yeah, those big time boxing historians did. Ned Fleischer, Charlie Rose, and the legendary Monty D. Cox. Yeah, huge boxing historians. Okay, that was the old master. Now, let's go to the Black Panther, Harry Wills. He was number one contender for like a couple of decades, Harry Wills. Yeah. And he wanted to fight. Then Jack Dempsey wanted to fight him too, but the government wouldn't allow it. I told you all the story about, when Jack Johnson and Jess Willard was the last, they didn't want any integrated heavyweight fights because that fight started a riot. 20 people lost their lives all over the country and 100 people were injured. So the government gave all the promoters orders. Texas Ricard admitted it. The government gave all the promoters orders not to make a mixed race heavyweight championship fight for fear of what the people would do, right? If the black fighter won. So from 1915 to 1937, when Jack Johnson lost his title, it was 22 years before another black man fought for the heavyweight title. That was Joe Louis in 1937. Okay. And then Joe Louis was just so good, the money they could make off of him, they couldn't deny him from fighting for it, So yeah. That's when it started back up. But yeah, Harry Wills, the Black Panther. Okay. We're going to talk about him and the Jack Dempsey situation and all of that right now. Great fighter. Held the colored heavyweight title. Yeah. And that was a title in all weight divisions. A lot of people think it was just at heavyweight, but no. The colored heavyweight title was in all divisions. Let's talk about Harry Wills now. The Black Panther. That's what they called him. And there he is. Harry Wills. The fight that never was. Okay. Now, back during that awful time when for 5 long years it seemed Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao would never ever meet in the ring, pundits and historians mused as to whether Maypac might be the biggest potential fight in boxing history to never materialize. Of course, it did materialize, and then many of us wished it hadn't for the way it went. But in truth, if it hadn't, it would have simply joined the long list of great fights that failed to take place. For example, what might have happened had iconic heavyweight champion Jack Dempsey and long-standing top contender Harry Wills ever clashed? We will never know. Dempsey versus Wills will forever be the heavyweight super fight that never was. Yeah, Dempsey wanted to fight him, but the government blocked it. Safe to assume it would have been one hell of a battle. Yet Dempsey was almost martyred in his inactivity. After winning the title by beating the tar out of Jess Willard in 1919, he competed just 5 times through the next 5 years. To put that into perspective, Danny Garcia, a contemporary often criticized for his lack of activity, has fought twice as often in the same span of time. Okay. But one story is that Jack Dempsey got upset because they wouldn't let him fight Harry Wills and decided that he wasn't going to fight anybody. That's when he went to Hollywood and started acting and stuff. Okay. And there's Jack, the legendary Jack Dempsey right there. That you won't let me fight who I want to fight, I'm not going to fight anybody then. Okay? That's why he was so inactive. That's the way I heard it. I'm a very reliable source. Now, what Dempsey lacked in a full schedule, however, he made up for in ferocity and raw talent. But here was a new kind of fighter, a vicious ring assassin who set a savage pace, advancing relentlessly in his awkward crouch, which in fact made him deceptively hard to hit. Dempsey may not have been invincible like Jack Johnson before him. He tasted defeat before winning the heavyweight crown, but he was a legitimate ring great with a wealth of hard-earned experience to support his high reputation. For example, after the powerful Louis Firpo punched him out of the ring in the opening round of their savage brawl, Dempsey came back and knocked Firpo down and out the following round. He was a force to be reckoned with, no doubt. Jack Dempsey. Yes, he was. Enter one Harry Wills, a Louisiana native known as the Black Panther, a man with a rectangular frame. Wills kicked around the heavyweight division for years, hoping to get a chance at the world title. He fought the great Sam Langford on many occasions, and had also gotten the better of men who had likewise faced Dempsey, including the dangerous Firpo. And it's worth noting that while Dempsey had to recover from a knockdown against the Wild Bull of the Pampas, Wills defeated the Argentinian with relative ease a year later. Him and Sam Langford fought 18 times. Officially, they said it was 22 times, but yeah, they fought 18 times. Because these black fighters had to fight each other. There were 4 black fighters. Harry Wills was one of them, I forgot, and there was 3 more. Sam Langford fought these 4 fighters a total of 53 times. There's 3 other fighters who fought a total of 53 times. Harry Wills 18 of 18 times. There's Wills and Firpo. The man that Wills beat with ease. Dempsey beat him in 2 rounds, but he knocked Dempsey down a couple times too. Yeah. But that triangle theory, that don't mean nothing. Styles make fights. So Wills was trying to get a title shot though. But there was a major stumbling block to this worthy challenger meeting Dempsey in the ring. That being the simple fact that Wills happened to be black. From the one particular vantage point in history, where people actually make sport of pretending to be offended by the innocuous, it's hard to imagine blatant and public prejudice being tolerated. Yet the racism of that day was very real. But ironically enough, Wills became so renowned and respected that even white America took a shine to him. Eventually, people, including those in the media, started asking aloud what was so wrong about giving a deserving challenger a crack at the heavyweight crown. And this man was #1 contender for like 15 years, right? He was the #1 contender for Jack Johnson and Jack Dempsey, the 2 big heavyweights of that era, champions. He was the #1 contender for both of them, Harry Wills was. And people were starting to ask what was so wrong about giving him a shot. In truth, Dempsey himself was willing to take Wills on, and for a whole lot of money too. There's those who argue that the Manasseh Mauler drew the color line might be interested to know he did in fact sign a contract to meet Wills, and that he had fought black opponents before. The fight, however, was simply not meant to be. The closest it may have come to actually occurring was in 1925. An agreement was reached with Wills, getting 50 grand, a sizable purse at the time. Yeah, 1925, 50 grand. But Dempsey's much larger payment never came through, and thus neither did one of the most anticipated fights in history. It is Wills and Sam Langford right there. That's the thumbnail. Yeah, that's Harry Wills and Sam Langford tussling. Wills battling the great Sam Langford. Instead, Dempsey fought and lost to Gene Tunney twice, the second time in insanely controversial fashion, while Wills went on to close out his career without a world title shot. To be sure, the phantom title fight Dempsey vs. Wills serves as a warning as to what happens when outside pressures and interests interfere with competition. Could Wills have bested Dempsey? It's a good question. Had the two met in 1925 or 1926, which was the time when the fight came closest to happening, Wills likely had a real chance. Then again, to be sure, matters like this make for uncomfortable discussion. It's not fun contemplating the widespread racism of the past, but it's also difficult to grasp that things are not always as black and white as they may at first appear, right? But it never happened, this fight between Wills and Dempsey. The truth is, a number of factors prevented Wills versus Dempsey from taking place. One of them being Jack Johnson, the Galveston Giant, famed for his arrogant ways and his openly consorting with white women, so outwith white America during his turbulent reign that he virtually guaranteed that no title shot would be given to a black man for many years after him. Yeah, Jack Johnson, the way he acted, had a lot to do with that. Yeah, it sure did. That's just a tale of the tape of Dempsey and Wills, but a matchup would have looked like. Additionally, Wills likely hurt his cause by refusing to face Gene Tunney in a lucrative title eliminator that could have put even more pressure on those who could have made the fight happen. Reportedly, Tunney was open to the fight, but Wills turned it down. Yeah, that was a mistake there. Wills should have took that one. In the end, one thing is clear. Both Wills and Dempsey were willing to face off in the ring. It's easy to cast Dempsey as the villain here and think it was all too easy for him to avoid the fight. But the evidence, including his signature, proves otherwise. Yeah, Wills made his biggest mistake when he turned down the Tunney fight, because a win over Tunney could have led directly to the Dempsey fight, because Tunney got the Dempsey fight. And if Wills would have fought him first and beat him, it would have been hard not to let Wills fight Dempsey. So he made a big miscalculation there by not fighting Tunney. Years later, Dempsey told interviewer Peter Heller that the real obstacle was finding a venue. Presumably, there was simply too much widespread objection on the part of the people who had the means to stage the fight. They wouldn't let you fight no place, Dempsey told Heller in 1970. Rickard wanted to make it, but there was no place that you could put it on. I wanted to fight him, but they wouldn't let you fight no place. Yeah, Dempsey definitely wanted to fight him, but they wouldn't let him. Yeah. Instead, Dempsey went on and fought Gene Tunney. Yep. It's hard not to feel bad for Wills in all this. And while Dempsey went on to iconic status, the Black Panther, despite his being an all-time great, is now largely forgotten. Though perhaps that was always meant to be the case. Perhaps Dempsey would indeed have prevailed had the two met in the ring. The fact we will never know is a blemish on the history of the sport. One brief side note. Wills reportedly ended up doing quite well for himself post-boxing in the real estate business. The man always regretted, however, the fight that never was, and in that he was not and still isn't alone. He should have took that Gene Tunney fight. That might have led straight to it. Okay, let's talk about Bill Richmond now. Yeah, Bill Richmond, the Black Terror. They call him the Black Terror, Bill Richmond. Pardon me for 1 second, please. Yep, this is okay, yeah, this is our fourth and final pioneer here, Bill Richmond. The Black Terror, that's what they called him. Yeah, and there's Bill right there. There's Bill Richmond, the Black Terror. Wednesday, tomorrow is Cuba. I think Cuba is next. On our countries list. Look at a different country every Thursday. All right, Bill Richmond, the Black Terror. Okay. This is our final pioneer. I got a list of other black fighters too, though. We will touch on briefly after this. In 1805, black former slave Bill Richmond, who became known as the Black Terror, was fighting an awesome pugilist from Bristol called Tom Cribb. The prize was to be champion of England. In those days, boxers were bare knuckle fighters and used to literally stand and toe the line throwing punches at each other until one dropped. Like I was saying earlier, that's all they did. They came out there and toed that line, and that's where they stayed for the entire round until one of them dropped. Then the round would end. You get a minute. If both fighters come back and toe the line, the fight continues, right? Endlessly. As long as they both came back out there was no limit, okay? The longest one I heard of is, I think somebody said something about 130 rounds, but I know of one that lasted 110 rounds, right? There was no limit on these fights, and that's all they did. They came out there and toed the line and stood there throwing punches until one dropped. Now, evading or blocking punches was a sign of weakness, for Britain was known and to a degree feared throughout Europe as a fighting mad nation. And still haven't changed that much to now. Now, winning was not as important as the way you played the game. Blind courage in the face of extreme pain brought the loudest cheers. Boxing was in those far-off days known as milling, and was totally void of any of the great skills it requires to become a champion today. Okay? Bill Richmond's skin pigmentation was a lighter shade of black, and in those days, he was cruelly referred to as a half-human. He was very intelligent and had been brought from America by Lord Perry Duke of Northumberland, educated and taught a trade as a cabinet maker. Lord Percy had been amused by the 14-year-old Bill Richmond's quick wit and sense of humor, when he lived in the house of the church minister, the Reverend Charlton, on Staten Island in the United States. And this nobleman had been a visitor. Young Bill could amusingly entertain guests by imitating the many flowery expressions and the fine gestures used by visitors to the house. He did it to perfection. In fact, Bill was allowed to propose the royal toast at dinner. His God Save the King was done with such panache and passion, all were impressed. This ability to conduct himself as a gentleman produced within himself a certain self-esteem that was to see him give up his apprenticeship, which had continued in London, to become a bare-knuckle fighter. Once, when escorting a young lady through the streets of London, some ruffians made comments about his color, and Bill pulverized them with punches that were thrown at an amazing speed. This newly discovered talent was stimulated by the feeling of injustice, and the use of his fists became most frequent. His talent for bare-knuckle fighting was perfected on those very streets, where the many soldiers in the local vicinity of his lodgings would fall foul of Bill by making racially abusive comments. In fact, you could say that Bill Richmond was the Muhammad Ali of his day, quick-witted and fast to react to prejudice. Bill, having been a member of the Duke's household, had been sheltered to a degree from such abuse, but was aware that there was a way to win over and deal with white people in a style most convincingly. Coincidentally, England had at that time developed a conscience. It was already beginning to realize that slavery was unjust, inhumane, and unworthy of the Christian way of life. The Abolition of Slavery Act would soon be passed. That was in England. After some successful fights with well-known bare-knuckle fighters, Bill was matched with the formidable man from Bristol called Tom Cribb for the championship of England. Cribb was considered unbeatable, as tough as teak, a man of very few words, whose training consisted of beating the bark off trees with his hardened bare fists. Cribb was much the taller man and stones heavier than Bill. His fighting talent was known all over the country. In those days, there were no weight divisions, so Bill, a mere welterweight by modern standards, was facing a very strong heavyweight. That's why I always say that's why they made weight classes, to prevent that. And nowadays, you got these weight bullies, and the same thing's still going on. You're fighting people much bigger than you all the time, right? Now, the fight itself lasted 90 minutes. Bill Richmond gave a brilliant and brave performance. The crowd, instead of booing his evasive skills and lightning hand speed, which were reminiscent of our great Sheffield boxer of the 1980s, Harold Graham, cheered him. This was a stylish, new, exciting way of fighting, and they wanted to see more of it. Now, Richmond had been well ahead on points by modern scoring, but the sheer weight and durability of the massive Tom Cribb tired him, and he was eventually beaten by the bigger and stronger fighter. Bill Richmond became a national hero after his performance, and these new skills were well sought after. How could a fighter so disadvantaged come so close to beating a tough fighter like Tom Cribb? Now, Richmond was no man's fool. He could see that boxing was his ticket to greater things, and actually built his first boxing academy on the very ground where Nelson's column now stands. His students included members of parliament and the nobility. Boxing had suddenly become acceptable, a much sought after sport, and its popularity spread the world over. In fact, Bill Richmond, who was also an excellent cricketer and conversationalist, then mixed with the best in the land. He was eventually decorated by King George IV for his great service and contribution, bringing to Britain a sweet science, the noble art of self-defense, boxing. For an ex-slave, such recognition was unique and amazing. The greatest sports writer of the day, Pierce Egan, editor of Boxiana, wrote glowingly of Bill Richmond's many contributions as a boxing coach and manager. Bill also trained in his own style an ex-slave called Tom Molyneux, who later fought the same Tom Cribb twice, unsuccessfully, for the title, champion of England. Molyneux had amazing talent, just like Bill Richmond, and was a true heavyweight. He could have beaten and nearly did stop Cribb, but crowd interference saved Cribb, and he recovered and fought back to win. Molyneux lacked the dedication of his mentor, Bill Richmond, and his lack of discipline. The love of beer and his great sexual appetite did not argue for success in such a physically demanding sport as boxing, and they were his downfall. Now, Bill Richmond proved to the world that the pigmentation of one's skin is only a climactic phenomenon, and that when human beings are raised in an environment where love, friendship, and opportunities are equal, they will achieve similar success. It is always up to the individual to make it happen. Remember, you are the captain of your own ship and master of your own destiny. It is up to you to make it happen, okay? Yeah, those were our four pioneers. Now we still got a little time. Let's talk about some other great pioneers from back in that era, okay? Just briefly now. We're going to talk a little bit about a few other pioneers of boxing from early 1900s, late 1800s. Some other greats from back then. Of course, Sam Langford. You know, we know about Sam. Sam Langford. We're still going to touch on it right quick. Sam Langford. Sam Langford. There we go. Okay, here. Now, Samuel Edgar Langford, nicknamed the Boston Tar Baby and the Boston Bone Crusher. He was a Canadian heavyweight boxer from Weymouth Falls, Nova Scotia. Despite his skill and impressive record, he's considered one of the greatest fighters to never win a world title due to racial barriers. Born into a difficult home life, Langford started his career in Boston at the Lenox Athletic Club. Sam Langford, the Boston Bone Crusher. We just talked with Thomas Molyneux. Tom Molyneux. Okay. Tom. Now, he was an American bare knuckle boxer and possibly a former slave. He spent much of his career in the United Kingdom and Ireland, where he had notable success. He arrived in England in 1809 and started his fighting career there in 1810. His two fights against Tom Cribb in 1810 and 1811, widely viewed as the champion of England, brought Molyneux fame, even though he lost both fights. The result of the first encounter was hotly contested, with accusations of a fix. The second fight with Cribb, however, was an undisputed loss. His prize fighting career ended in 1815. After a tour that took him to Scotland and Ireland, he died in Galway, Ireland in 1818 at age 34. In the first fight, they said Molyneux was winning, and the crowd jumped in there, interfered, and helped Cribb, because they wanted him to lose. Because he beat Bill Richmond, the guy we just talked about, because there was no weight limits. Bill Richmond was really a welterweight. But Bill Richmond trained Molyneux, and Cribb was a heavyweight, right? So Richmond trained Molyneux, and Molyneux fought just like Richmond, but Molyneux was a true heavyweight, right? And he was beating this guy, Cribb, so the crowd jumped in there and interfered and made sure Cribb won. Yeah, they did that back in them days. You betting on a certain fighter he losing, jump in there and help him. They most certainly did. Yep. Sure did. Jack Blackburn. We're just talking about some other pioneers of the sport from back in that era. That's all. Jack Blackburn. Charles Henry Jack Blackburn was an American boxer and boxing trainer, fighting in the first half of his career as a lightweight and later a welterweight. He was known for an exceptional defense and fought many men above his weight class, including 6 fights with the great Sam Langford. Yeah, Jack trained Joe Louis from the start of Joe Louis' career until Jack died, right? Yeah, he was Joe Louis's trainer, original trainer, until his death. Joe Jeanette. Jeremiah Joe Jeanette. He was considered one of the best heavyweight boxers of the early 20th century. Because he was African American, he was not given a shot at the world heavyweight title, though he did win the world colored heavyweight championship on 2 occasions. Joe Jeanette. We talked about this guy yesterday. Barbados Joe Walcott. Let's look at him again briefly. Barbados Joe. Joe Walcott, also known as Barbados Joe Walcott, right? He was in boxing known as, it was a Jersey Joe Walcott, that's where he took his name from, right? And Barbados reigned as the world welterweight champion from 1901 to 1906, becoming the first black man ever to win the welterweight title. Sam McVeigh. Sam McVeigh. Okay, yeah, he was an American Hall of Fame heavyweight boxer during the early 20th century, famously known as the Oxnard Cyclone. He ranked alongside Jack Johnson, Joe Jeanette, Sam Langford, and Harry Wills, some of the best heavyweights of their time. All of them except Johnson were denied a shot at the World Heavyweight Championship due to the color bar, which was ironically maintained by Johnson when he became the first black to win the World Heavyweight title. Despite being denied a title shot, Sam McVeigh enjoyed the famed career that took him across the globe. IRA. Oh my God, look at that. Always got to be somebody. Where do they get these people from? Where do they wake up and say, well, how ignorant can I be today? That's their first thought when they open their eyes in the morning. How ignorant can I be today? OMG. Okay, who's next? Well, he's gone. We talked about Battling Sicky. We know Jack Johnson. Let's talk about him anyway. Jack Johnson. Yeah, Jack Johnson. We know about him. John Arthur Johnson, the Galveston Giant, right? At the height of the Jim Crow era, became the first black world heavyweight boxing champion. His 1910 fight against James J. Jeffries was dubbed the fight of the century. Yeah. And we got the great Tiger Flowers. Tiger Flowers. Theodore Tiger Flowers, nicknamed the Georgia Deacon, rose to prominence in the early 20th century, becoming the first Black American world middleweight boxing champion after defeating Harry Greb to claim the title in 1926. Tiger Flowers. And finally, battling Jim Johnson. Battling Jim. He fought as a heavyweight from 1908 to 1918. He had little success and lost with great frequency to top boxers such as Sam Langford, Joe Jeanette, Sam McVeigh, Harry Wilson, Kid Norfolk. And he had little success and lost frequently. So when Jack Johnson gave in and gave a black fighter a shot, guess who he gave it to? Jim Johnson, the worst of them all. Right? That's who he gave the title shot to. Yeah. Jack did. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna put the link in and then keep on rolling along. If anybody interested in hitting the link, we'll talk or keep listening to me. You get that in there. But how's everybody today? It's hump day. We're going to be talking about Cuba tomorrow. I think Cuba is next. Cuba, right, will be our next country we discuss. It's Thursday already. This time is going by crazily, man. Crazily. Almost Christmas. Okay, let me see here. Be right with you. Okay, here we go. Here's the link. Okay. All right, IRA. What does it stand for? I probably stand for ignorant. Yeah, I believe it's Cuba tomorrow. Let me find out right now. I was doing that earlier, but I couldn't get it to come up. Yeah. I know Friday is John Pascal, life and career of John Pascal. That should be a good one. Here we go right here. Let's see what's next. Tomorrow, we're still in the seas. Yeah, I did up a nice show yesterday on Ireland because Technique had said I should do a show on that. And then I said, well, what am I going to do when I come to Ireland? So I'm going to save that to when we get to it, right? Yeah. Okay, so tomorrow is, I'm jumping through them, not doing every country. Last week was what? China? Colombia? Oh, wow, yeah. Oh, we got a while before we get to Cuba. Colombia, yeah. Colombia or Cuba? I'm going to see what I can find on Colombia. It might be Cuba, though. But yes, that's tomorrow. Yeah, making our way on through. Okay, let's see here. Oh yeah. Bear with me for a moment. Remember. Oh, oh yeah. Okay, here we go. Which era produced the highest quality heavyweight boxers? Was it the 70s? Or was it another era that was better than the 70s? What era was the best of heavyweight boxing? Let's see. Now, if you believe the experts, boxers, trainers, sports writers, boxing historians, the two greatest eras of boxing were the Golden Age and 20 years later, the era of Lewis, Holyfield, Bowe, and Tyson, 70s and 90s, okay? The current era is generally considered the worst in boxing history, what we're in right now, okay? Before one single boxing expert, not fighters, not trainers, not writers, not boxing historians, considered it anything other than the worst in history, the current era we're in right now, yeah. For anyone who knows anything about boxing, the legacy of the 1990s greats, Tyson, Lewis, Holyfield, and Douglas, is a great one, second only to the Golden Age. Why? More top 100 of all time, world-class, highly skilled heavyweights were active during the Golden Age than at any other period in boxing history. Okay, talking about the 70s. Names like Ali, Liston, Frazier, Foreman, Norton, Patterson, Quarry, Lau, Shavers, Bugner, Ellis, Young, Holmes, Spinks, Patterson, and Bonavina were known throughout the world, okay? We're known throughout the world. More Hall of Famers are from the Golden Age of the 70s. More top competition and more wins against top competition than from any other era, with the age of Lennox Lewis in the 90s running a close second. The Depression era is third, and the current era is dead last. Dead last. The best heavyweight today is Alexander Usyk, right? Who's really a cruiserweight. So what is the best age? The Golden Age of the 70s. First, we have to define the Golden Age as being from 1964, when Ali won the title, to 1978, when Larry Holmes took over. And the age of Lennox Lewis Holyfield, Bo, those guys, goes from 1985, when Tyson won the title, to 2000. The Klitschko's are not counted in the age of Tyson, Lewis, and Holyfield because they are considered to have their own era, the Klitschko era from 2000 to 2015. And that's second to worst next to this current era. Klitschko era is the second worst. This era is the worst of all for heavyweights. Plain old numbers tell the tale. Twice as many golden age heavyweights are in the Hall of Fame. 10 from the golden age of Ali and Frazier are in the Hall of Fame. 5 from the Lewis, Holyfield, Tyson, Bo era are already in the Hall of Fame. There is no fighter in history more legendary than Muhammad Ali, and no more legendary age than the golden age. That takes nothing from Lennox Lewis, Tyson, Holyfield, and Bo. But as Mike Tyson himself said, nobody beats Ali. Let's start with Ali. Legendary boxing historian Monty Cox wrote that Muhammad Ali was the most naturally gifted heavyweight champion in history. Okay? Then you have, after Ali, supremely talented. What's up, B3? In the building. After Ali, you have supremely, we were talking about the best eras for heavyweights, okay, in boxing today. After Ali, you had the supremely talented Larry Holmes, George Foreman, Ken Norton, Floyd Patterson, Sonny Liston, all in the Hall of Fame, right? BBC boxing writer and historian Ben Durs said of the Golden Age, Ali reigned in the most talent-rich era of heavyweight boxing, winning the title from the fearsome Sonny Liston in 1964, winning it again from the even more fearsome George Foreman 10 years later, and beating greats such as Floyd Patterson, Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, in between. Max Kellerman says, from 1970, when Ali came back from his forced exile, to 1978, when Ali won back his crown for the final time, Ali shared the very top shelf with Joe Frazier and George Foreman. And the three of them were supported by Ken Norton and Joe Bugner. And in the beginning of the decade, Oscar Bonavena, Jerry Quarry, and Jimmy Ellis. And at the end of the decade, Ernie Shavers, Ron Lyle, and Jimmy Young. Ali fought all of them. And many of the others fought each other. The greatest heavyweight era ever. If you count from the day Ali dethroned the most feared boxing champion ever, Sonny Liston, he dominated his sport for 14 years. No one else has ever done that. Now, Lennox Lewis deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, first among equals in his generation of fighters, along with Tyson, Spinks, Bo, and Holyfield. Manuel Stewart said, Lennox Lewis is the best heavyweight since Ali, and the world should now acknowledge him. Max Kellerman also called the age of Lewis, Tyson, Holyfield, and Bo the second greatest ever. Yeah, that is the second ever, though. The second greatest heavyweight era in history began and ended almost exactly 20 years after the first. It began in February 1990 when Mike Tyson lost to Buster Douglas. A division which seemed dull because of Tyson's extreme dominance suddenly blossomed. The end of the era seems to be Lennox Lewis' demonstration of superiority over Evander Holyfield in their first fight in December 1998, which was scandalously ruled a draw. So we begin the era with the biggest upset in the history of boxing, and we end it with one of boxing history's biggest controversies. In between, we had Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson, Riddick Bowe, and Lennox Lewis on top, supported by some comebacking champions, George Foreman and Larry Holmes. and dangerous contenders: Ray Mercer, Razor Ruddock, Michael Moorer, and Tommy Morrison in the first half of the decade, and Ike Bucci, who fought last weekend. He did his time in prison and now he's back. But him, David Tua, and Andrew Galata towards the end of the decade. Andrew Foulpole Galata, the second greatest heavyweight era ever. There's no shame in the 1990s being the second greatest heavyweight era ever. And by the way, we're in the worst one right now, dead last. Okay? We're up there, Exploding Fist Ninja in the building. How are you today? Yeah. The current era is dead last. The best heavyweight right now is Usyk, who's really a cruiserweight. So, wow. But none of the heavyweights can beat him. So, he's the best heavyweight. And the Klitschko era is the second worst ever. Yeah, we get ready to get out of here in a few minutes. But anyway, there's no shame in the 1990s being the second greatest heavyweight era ever. Comparison of talent in the golden age 1990s and today, okay? 22 top 150 fighters as rated by BoxRec fighting in the golden age. 17 top 150 fighters as rated by BoxRec fighting in the 1990s. 10 top 150 fighters as rated by BoxRec fighting today. Ali fought 17 top 100 fighters, beating 16 of them. And he fought 22 top 150 fighters, beating 21 of them. Okay? Joe Frazier fought 8 top 100 fighters, beating 7 at least once. Liston fought 8 top 100 fighters, beating 6 at least once. George Foreman fought 7 top 100 fighters, beating 5 of them at least once. Lennox Lewis fought 10 top 100 fighters, beating all of them at least once. Holyfield fought 10 top 100 fighters, beating 7 of them at least once. Tyson fought 8 top 100 fighters, beating 5 of them once. Riddick Bowe fought 4 top 100 fighters, beating all of them at least once. The 4 great Golden Age champions fought 40 top 100 fighters, beating 34 of them for an 85% win rate. The Lewis Tyson Holyfield Bowe champions fought 32 top 100 fighters and only beat 26 of them for a 76% win rate. Now the modern heavyweights, talking about Fury, Wilder, and Joshua, fought 7 top 100 fighters and beat 5 of them. Now, Anthony Mason, boxing historian, says, the only way to fairly rank a boxer's place in history is by comparing their resumes. And that does not mean just wins and losses. It is too easy today to fight only has-beens and never will-be's and run up the record. And it also is important when you fought them too, you know. You might fight a big name that's way past his prime. You know, he's not that, he's still got that name, but he's not that fighter anymore. Or you might fight somebody that becomes a big name before they get there. So when you fought a person is important too. Not just who you got on your resume. When did you fight them? You know? In the end, the 1990s were the second best era of heavyweights ever. They stand second only to the golden age, the age of Ali, Liston, Frazier, and Foreman. And there's no shame in that. As Lennox Lewis said very well, Muhammad Ali inspired me to chase my dreams in and out of the ring. Larry Holmes gave about modern heavyweights like super heavyweight Ruiz. That's what he said about these current guys. Larry Holmes said, we beat these guys up. We beat them up. They don't have the abilities that we had. True statement. Mm-hmm. This era is the worst ever. Today's era is the sorriest ever. None of the modern heavyweights except Tyson Fury and Usyk can actually box. Larry Holmes was his normal blunt self about the ability of modern heavyweights to compete against real fighters, including Mike Tyson. They couldn't fight me. I'd have kicked their ass. I'd have knocked them out, he said. Come on. They can't take a punch. They're amateurs. To me, they're amateurs. To Ali, they're amateurs. To Ken Norton, they're amateurs. To Joe Frazier, they're amateurs. To us, they're kids. They can't fight. They didn't learn how to fight. We learned how to fight. Lenny Lewis says Anthony Joshua does not really want to fight the best of his time. Either Wilder or Fury, saying, I think he's too happy in England being protected and boxing in front of the British crowd. Wow. In any event, modern fighters not only are not superior to fighters from the past, they are generally nowhere near as good. Nor are Holmes and Lewis alone in their criticism of modern heavyweights. In his riveting book, The Art of Boxing, The Rise and Decline of the Great Sweet Science, Mike Silver, point by point, shows the ongoing deterioration of boxing skills, the endurance, the decline in the number of fights, and the psychological readiness of championship caliber boxers. The strengths and weaknesses of today's superstars are analyzed and compared to those of such past greats as Joe Louis, Sugar Ray Robinson, Jack Dempsey, and Jake LaMotta. And the modern fighters simply do not stand up in the comparison. Emmanuel Stewart said of today's bigger fighters, they are nowhere near as skilled as the old fighters. All the good big men are in the NFL or the NBA. Angelo Dundee said before his death, the great heavyweights are gone. Lennox Lewis was the last great heavyweight you will ever see in your lifetime. These guys coming up now just can't box. Fighters today fight far fewer rounds, box less in the gym, and simply do not learn the fundamentals of the game. Right. Like I said, Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk are the only heavyweights in the game today that can actually box. Yeah. Comparing the modern heavyweight records against top competition. In the modern age, the trend is to fight nobodies and never was's and pad the record. Wilder is the worst. He has met one top 100 fighter and lost to. Okay? Fury has met two top 100 fighters. Wilder and Usyk. Got 2 wins. Right? And a draw. And then 2 losses. Joshua is right there with Fury. Wilder's highest ranked opponent who he beat is 879-year-old Luis Ortiz, who is ranked number 208. His highest ranked opponent under 40 is at Powerhouse. Never heard of him. But yeah, this era is the worst era ever when you talk about heavyweights. Ain't no question about it. Okay. But tomorrow it's going to be Colombia or Cuba is going to be our country that we cover tomorrow. In the when we talk about history. Thursday we talk about histories in a certain country. It will probably be Cuba. Okay. But I appreciate everybody for coming today. Hope you enjoyed the show. Be back tomorrow with another one. 2 p.m. Be there or be square. Yeah, Kid Pambele, Colombia might be okay. Okay. But everybody have a good day.